What is up, guys? This is Basak, and you are watching En Route, which is our brand new content segment where we marry culture with business. This show is, as ever, sponsored by the good folks over at Roadmap MBA. Big shout out to them. Now, we are so excited to have the powerhouse that is Sharmaine Lovegrove with us today. She is the managing director of Dialogue, a division of Hachette UK. She also still publishes, which is quite unusual for an MD, and runs the literary list Dialogue Books. She also now has a team of 6 editors across commercial and literary segments. Hi, Sharmaine. So lovely to have
Hi,
you with us today.
thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, this segment exists to give people a bit of a behind the scenes look into industries that they might not be very familiar with. With that in mind, could you start off by sharing kind of what an MD does and also what a publisher does? Because you kind of
Okay,
hold both hats.
I do both. Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to. So I love demystifying the publishing industry. I think it's really important. So, as a managing director, I essentially run a publishing house within a publishing house. So, our publishing house, Hachette, is our sort of main publishing house. And then we have 12 different divisions. Each division is run by a managing director. And those divisions kind of act as the publishing house because Hachette itself doesn't publish, but the divisions do. So we have Orion, and we have Little Brown, and we have Quercus and John Murray, and there's children's and education. And then in each division, then it houses imprints, and imprints are they're run by publishers, and each imprint has its own very clear directive of what it publishes. So at Dialogue, we have 2 imprints, and one of them is Dialogue Books, and I'm still the publisher of that. So my job as a publisher is to run the list, have the vision for the list. We call it, with Dialogue, we call books that spark the conversation. It's very literary, very upmarket crossover, fiction and non-fiction. And then we have a commercial list that's run by Christina Demosthenes. That's called Renegade Books. That's books that break the rules. And then they do a lot of commercial titles, so a lot more romance, crime, thriller, celebrity non-fiction. They just have a kind of different remit in terms of mass market. And then, so as my managing director role, I oversee the whole company and I make sure that we're making the money we need to, that
Yeah.
we're selling the books that we need to, and that everybody is sort of on board with like the vision and the culture of the company. And so we're the smallest and newest. It's never happened before that an imprint has gone from one division and moved out to another. It's really exciting. I was at Little Brown before, and Little Brown have 15 imprints, and across fiction, non-fiction, commercial, literary, and they also have a sci-fi imprint as well. So yeah, it's very different jobs. One is about the management and the growth and the sort of ambition of a company, and the other one is about the focus and acquisition of titles, of books, working really closely with authors and making sure that those books, working with marketing and publicity to get those books and sales to get those books to the widest range of readers. So it's actually really, really different jobs.
Wow, I mean, you are a busy lady, with that in mind, that must be a lot. How do you protect the vision then? Because you have this kind of strategy piece that you spoke about, and then you have this kind of more cultural imprint moment that you want to protect essentially what dialogue is about. How do you go about doing that when there's just so much noise out there?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly, I kind of live between 2 places. So my family and I, we live in Berlin with my husband and 3 children. And there I'm able to really be a publisher And I get to edit a lot, and I get to sort of really think about what it is that I'm doing for the books in a totally different way. And then I have a lot more space to strategize because my company isn't in Berlin, so I don't have as many meetings. I don't need to be in as many places. I don't go to as many parties. It's just very much like work and heads down work, quiet family time. And then I come to frenetic London for 10 days a month, and it's amazing, and there's so much energy, and as a Londoner there's lots of friends and families and work, and that work is all very sort of face to face, and a lot of meetings, a lot of different people with a lot of different needs, and it's really exhilarating, and it's also exhausting. But I think having these sort of two diametrically opposed lives really helps for me to manage doing such a kind of diametrically opposed job, in a way, of being many things to many people. So just taking that space. And so, yeah, I've kind of built it in that way to be able to do that.
It's beautiful. And before kind of dialogue books, there was dialogue scouting, which was your book to film consultancy. What did good look like for you back then when you started out on this journey a little bit? And what does good look like for you now?
Oh, that's such a great question. So before there was dialogue scouting, there was Dialogue Berlin, which was a publishing consultancy in Germany. And before there was Dialogue Berlin, there was Dialogue Berlin that I started in 2009. So this journey has been from 2009 until now, and will continue. And it's really amazing that this little bookshop that I opened in Berlin, in the back of a tea rooms, has now become its own publishing house. And a couple of days ago, I got to see our new totes. We just rebranded as a division, and I got to see our new totes. And, you know, there's these moments where I'm just like, I sort of can't believe that this little dream that I had, you know, like when I was in my 20s, to open a bookshop, which was as big as it got in terms of my dream at that point, has now morphed into a publishing house, or the second biggest publishing house globally. And I suppose, to answer the question of like, what does good look like? I think what I've done, rather than constantly sort of think about what's next, is give myself a lot of space to understand what the opportunity is in front of me. That space has, and so then the focus around good and like what excellence is really around sort of my values. And ultimately, I've always seen myself as someone who is a facilitator between an author and readers. And that what I'm really obsessed with is, how do we get stories to a bookshop? If you think about the consultancy, if you think about the book to film consultancy, if you think about the and if you think about the publishing, and now the division, it's all that. And so often people are like, oh, you've done so many things, like it's all just so different, how are you going to do this next thing? And I'm like, well, it's all the same thing. It's all about that connectivity of storytelling to other humans. Like, that's my ultimate obsession. And because these things are sort of very clear, then I've been able to kind of hold on. And by keeping the name Dialogue throughout, it means that I've been able to kind of be quite consistent in my path.
It's value-centered living, right? That's what it sounds like, and that's what it is. And often we don't necessarily employ so much value in our work or intention behind our work. We kind of just work. And it seems like from the jump, you had a very clear instinct for what you wanted to see, and even if it wasn't there, and worked hopefully to make that happen, and filled you know, maybe unknowing to you, avoiding the market, which has been so, you know, instrumental and impactful. So, you know, kudos to you for following that weird thread.
Thank you.
Spiritual something.
Yeah. And it's not, you know, I remember when I was younger and I worked in bookshops, friends would find it kind of amusing. You know, I came from a very middle class part of London. I'm from Battersea, and people find it very amusing that I was sort of working in bookshops and not trying to be like a lawyer or trying to kind of earn money. You know, I grew up with a lot of creative people, so of course not everybody was like that. But certainly by the time we got to university, you know, and that kind of that push, and that was a minority of people I knew. I said most people I knew were very, very creative and pursuing that creativity. But it was the bookshop was in between, because I was neither the writer nor was I the business person. But by spending so much time with bookshops are businesses, publishing is business, and then also creatives, then I kind of was able to kind of find my niche and
language for them, and actually acted as a bit of a conduit between these two worlds, especially for people that don't read. I mean, I love to read, and I'm always surprised and shocked by how much people don't read and don't look for that as a grounding exercise sometimes.
yeah, exactly. And like to learn and think and to listen to other people, it's like I recently I started listening when I was pregnant with my twins. They're nearly 2. I started listening to a lot of audiobooks, and now I just find it really a great way of being able to kind of keep up with books and go backwards, and just to engage. And it's so funny how sometimes I'm doing something and I'm just like, I just want to get back to my book. I learn so much, and sometimes when you don't have access, you can't have access to all worlds all the time, and even if we think that we do on Twitter or Instagram, social media, but we don't. We might have access to people's opinions, lived lives, right? And so I think that level of like empathy and engagement for me comes from reading and taking that time to understand the lives of others. And that's sort of my obsession, really. Like, I studied anthropology for my undergrad, and it's like that's the thing that I'm really interested in, is like human beings and stories. And the fact that I've been able to kind of take that hobby and turn it into a career. I'm not exactly sure that, the moment when I realized that was happening, but that absolute sort of dedication to it is like, it's been very clear for a long time.
Beautiful. And there's a lot in a name. Why dialogue books? Why dialogue?
Yeah, so I remember it starting as like a working name, like when before we had a space. I just moved to Berlin, and my then boyfriend, my now husband, we were just kind of, I just was like, to know, I just could call it dialogue. And because I was really, you could call, I was like, would you call bookshop pages or call it, but I was like, what is it that we're trying to do? And also my surname before I got married was Reed. And my grandma's surname of her family is Parchment. So I already had these kind of paper like story sort of references in my name and my family names, but they just didn't feel right. And I wanted to do I was kind of interested in doing something quite modern and something that would be really connective. And I think the thing about a dialogue is it's just something that hadn't been really explored in. You are having a conversation, a book is having a conversation with you. You are having a conversation with a book, with any narrative, with the author, with their reader, yourself. Like it's not a one-way thing. It's something that's very alive and very and can move, and we're having a dialogue right now. It's there's nothing static about it, whereas when I thought about like reading or like read, it just kind of felt very still. And Parchment also, I already knew we were going to have ebooks, and I knew like there's technology, whereas a dialogue is the thing that we're always coming back to on a page or listening or whatever. It's like the thing that we do the most is have dialogue with each other. So that's kind of where that came from. And then the sort of sparking the conversation has been part of dialogue books from the beginning. And because I wanted to stock books in my bookshop and sell books that would be about sparking that conversation. So it's very curated and very much around like what's going to bring us into new worlds and new experiences, or worlds that we may be familiar with and pertain to have knowledge of but don't. So yeah, that dialogue is like a constant.
Beautiful. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, and new understandings of each other, I think, as well.
Exactly.
I was really fascinated to discover that your uncle is Len Garrison.
Yeah.
Which, for those that don't know, he founded the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton. I've been myself. and it's just such an amazing kind of almost monument, celebrating and, you know, almost capturing Black British history specifically. How did being part of that lineage and almost those politics shape your own worldview?
Oh my God, you have no idea how much it means to me that you'd mentioned this. He was such a sort of foundational font of knowledge. And my aunt, his wife, Marie Garrison, wrote to me last week and said that he would be really proud of me. And that just meant so much. They founded the Black Cultural Archives in 1981, in April 1981, which was actually the month and year that I was born. And you know, the backdrop of the Brixton riots and the need to really preserve our culture, and validate it, and for it to be I didn't realize in a monumental way, I think was something that my uncle really wanted. You know, he was a Pan-African writer and activist, and for him that kind of path of enlightenment, and that, like, you know, there has to be more than what we've just been given, was all of those things were like really crucial to him. And you know, he died 20 years ago, and it was so shocking, and so sad. And you know, he died, he had a heart attack. And it's so interesting now because I'm a trustee and I'm one of the co-chairs of the board, and I really earned that position given my work, and professional work, but it means so much to me to be there as a member of the family. And I do really think about when it's really stressful, and I do think calm, you know, like just keep it calm. And I think when you have been related to someone that is that passionate, and then they die in that way, I don't think it's, you know, I think it's helped me to understand how to try and bring that emotion into work, and how to bring that passion. Like everything I do is with purpose, and I learned that from him. But how to also take care of yourself, and I think that's where like the dual life for me, and you know, I definitely overdo it, but yeah, I think like there's a lot of perspective that I have from his life and his commitment to equity and equality for Black people in Britain. And for me, that's like furthering that mission, but around inclusion. And so it wasn't possible for me to set up a imprint and then dialogue without it there being a purpose. And I think that kind of my Black British experience, my Jamaican experience, like, you know, living in Germany as well, then one thing that I understand is like living with absolute purpose. And that's a huge privilege, actually, to be able to wake up and to know who you are and what you're doing and why. And so, you know, often when people have that sort of privilege debate and sort of say, I'm privileged because I'm white middle class, and I'm like, well, no, you might be entitled, but you're not like, this is a privilege, like to have this purpose and to have this drive and to have this vision, like to live with that. And I think my uncle really instilled that pride. And I think recently it's kind of been taken away from us in a way of the way that people sort of talk about themselves by virtue of being privileged. I feel like it's taking away that self-actualizing pride. And I want to sort of reframe that, in the same way that my uncle really wanted to reframe the quality of knowledge that we have around Black culture in Britain, and the opportunities. So yeah, it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing for me.
I mean, he would be so proud, that you're essentially also carrying on the mission in your own way, with your own tools and with your own love. I can hear the passion in your voice, and it's so beautiful to bear witness to it.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about equity and equality. With dialogue books, you almost kind of single-handedly, to my mind, have answered the call initially for inclusion and representation within this industry. Despite there obviously and evidently being more work to do, are you positive about the direction of travel that we're now going in, with other imprints like Murky Books popping up and other kind of established partners essentially taking notice and actually putting money where their mouth is?
Yes and no. I'm really happy and so happy about Murky. Like, I think Lamara, who runs it, is like amazing. I'm really happy. I'm really happy that the work that we do. So I'm also a co-founder and co-organizer of the Black Writers Guild. We fight for equity and equality. We lobby publishing houses for equity and equality for Black writers in Britain, with the big 5 publishers. I'm super proud of that work. And, you know, we just had a conference the other day, our second conference, and to see that many Black writers in a room, you know, is just phenomenal. Yeah. And also, like, we know how to party, we know how to like throw down, like our food is amazing, our culture is amazing, our stories are amazing. Yeah. I think, like, you know, the equity thing is really still hard for people to understand what it means to be able to be yourself entirely and to be able to bring that in its fullness and to reach your potential from your starting point. For me, equality is around kind of getting us to this point of the sort of, you know, to try and be equal to somebody else. And in our society's case, that's a white, cisgendered, heterosexual, middle-class man. And then close behind female, and that looks like equality, right? But for me, equity is like we're all individuals, we all have different starting points, we all have different understandings of the world, we all have different experiences. How do we reach our potential, which may be different, and that's okay, but it's valid, and it's about figuring out how to do that in our societies and in our industries. And in publishing, what kind of makes me really dismayed, like, is you ask the question of like understanding what good is. Mm-hmm. And what I see a lot is majority, you know, publishing houses are sort of, you know, 92% white and 87% female, and overwhelmingly cisgendered and overwhelmingly heterosexual. And that kind of conversation that happened around sort of white people by, like, just by birth being privileged, right? Middle-class white people being privileged meant that all of that unconscious bias training that happened and all of that cultural awareness training that happened, I think kind of took us back a bit, because then you suddenly have all of these people who are just being really careful and really cautious. And when you're really careful and really cautious and you're hesitant about anything, it's very hard to make the right decisions. And so what happens is that a lot of people get book deals, a lot of people pay a lot of editors pay a lot of money for those books. But then when they get those books, they don't necessarily, they're suddenly like, it's like a hot potato. Like, I've got this book by a Black author on my hands and I don't know how to do, like, you know, and you just see this hesitancy and you see this fear, and then they say the wrong things, or they treat the authors with absolute kid gloves, as, you know. And you're really talking about overwhelmingly Black British people who have been brought up in Britain, educated in Britain, have British accents, but their editors are asking, how do I talk to you? Yeah. You know, do I need to have a bag of plantain chips when you come in? You know, and that hesitancy has had like a really huge impact on getting the work done. And the work is publishing the book well. And that hesitancy and that kind of that need for the editors, the publishers, the marketing, publicity to like center themselves in somebody else's narrative and experience for fear of getting it wrong. Like, they're trying to do the right thing, but when they center themselves in it, rather than just being like, I'm just publishing a great book, you can really see the difference. And so on one hand, we've like come really far. You know, there are more books by Black writers. On the other hand, we are, I fear that we're going backwards, and that fatigue of trying to do the right thing, and that fatigue of having centered yourself for whiteness and for all the atrocities that you haven't actually committed, that you are internalizing because someone told you to, because you believe that's the internet told you to do that, then is actually taking us backwards. So I'm just like distinctly unimpressed by how people took that information from the murder of George Floyd, like the brutal murder of a Black man in America, and then transposed that onto kind of British culture, and then kind of just got it really wrong. Just got it wrong. And so my request is that there's like less censoring and like more actual kind of just treat people like human beings, like treat people with like, that's where equality comes in, of like treating people equal, and not seeing like a very core thing of like, I am British, born and raised, I am Jamaican. I have this, so I know everything that someone white middle class from London knows, right? There's nothing that they don't know, from like wines to books to house prices to whatever.
Yeah, avocado toast. Yeah.
Avocado toast, know all about it, right? But I also know that avocado, where it comes from, and I've seen it grown on trees in my family's gardens in Jamaica, right? So I also have this additional knowledge. And that knowledge is great. It's great that I know not only where the avocado comes from, but I also have a very rich, like, I'm from the African diaspora. So I know my history, I know my culture, I know about 450 years of slavery and 250 years of colonialism. Like, I know about all of that. And I also know, because I'm British, about the Tudors. And I also know that most people I know who are British don't know about colonialism and don't know about the slave trade. So, I can bring that to you. That's what that addition means, right? I can bring you the additional culture, and I can tell you what to do with your avocado to make it even tastier than the unripe one that you're using on your toast. Then I live in Germany, right? And I've been raising my children in Germany. I've lived there since 2008. I've owned a bookshop there. I've done a lot there, including having 3 children and getting married. And so I can speak German and I can talk about that culture. That multiculturalism is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's so great, right? And so the idea that they have to like tiptoe around me in case I don't know anything, or in case I don't understand their ways, is just ludicrous. It's ludicrous. And when you're talking to anyone who is multicultural, so has an accent from, you can specify as one place, looks like someone from another place.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Strange names.
Exactly. Not strange names, beautiful names that you've not heard before, right? Beautiful names that you've not heard before, that of languages that you're yet to discover, right? Like when that is in front of you, you have an opportunity, but instead it's treated with fear and mistrust. And that is just like, I don't have any time for that. And I'm not interested in that. And that's not progress, right? Progress is seeing the opportunity, being excited. And I think people are when they buy those books, but then they worry because then they start thinking about themselves. But what if they think that I'm just racist? What if they think I'm really basic? And you're like, but what if you think I'm basic?
It's not about you at the end of the day. And that's the point. And this level of fear is always misconstrued to other and to distance, and it's been so effective for time eternal. And actually what happens when we move to the closer and we celebrate the fact that they love their beans on toast. I'm not mad at that. I don't eat that, but I'm not mad at it. And so that's the point. It's a very effective mechanism, I think, also just not to do the work, to be afraid. And to constantly say, well, I can't pronounce your name, or I don't understand your culture. Our cultures are not that different. They might be kind of, ours might be more exotic and more interesting, right? But they're not that different. We're still human beings. We still have the same urges, needs, wants, and you can learn, and it's okay.
Exactly. And if you can't learn, then just don't take it on, and then really think about, is this really for you? Is this really what you should be doing? Is this really your role? Is this how you want to live your life? And like, you need to ask yourself those questions and, not blame it on others. But that fear is something that stops progress. And that's the thing that I find makes me most furious about like what's been going on over recent years.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. And for you then, what would you say to any writers listening, especially Black writers or kind of marginalized writers who are dreaming of getting published, knowing all these obstacles, being aware of the industry, being aware of the barriers they face. What advice do you have for them? For example, if they want to even be published by Dialogue Books, how do they come to a place where their manuscript lands on your desk?
So the first thing I would say is write exactly what you want and don't try and write into a trend. If you can see something happening at the moment, it's already happened, and that we publish we buy books. So at the moment I'm buying books that will be published in 2025, right? So write what you want, write what you feel, and be yourself, like that's my first thing. Like, please be yourself, be the best creative and be the best writer that you can be. Then look at who are your influences? Who do you love? What writers do you admire? Who do you feel that you've been, do you have a writing style or subject or genre that's like somebody else? Everybody does, everything's original and unoriginal at the same time, so you have your peers. Look at the back of their books and their acknowledgements. They'll always talk about their agent. They'll always thank their agent and thank their editor, and then send a letter to the agent explaining why you think that they would be a really good match to you. Make it as personalized as possible, make it as perfect personalized as you would apply for any job, along with the first 3 chapters of your manuscript, and try and find a few different agents, and then those agents, when they take on a client, then they send it out to me and my team of editors. And so that's broadly how the process works. And you can go on social media, you can go on Twitter, you can use this. There is a book called the Agents and Authors Handbook, that's published by Bloomsbury, that has all of the agencies in the UK. And that is like your first point. And you need that person to be an advocate. And like if you're going to a job interview or if you're going to any kind of professional thing, if somebody is the right fit. And the thing is if you know the value of your work, as in that it's good and it should be published, then take away that feeling of being grateful for it to be done, like be in the process and be in the moment, and but be very active in understanding what's happening, really understand your contract, really understand what the publishing process looks like don't be passive in it, and don't just be grateful and expect, and just be like, thank you so much, this is so great that this is happening for me. It should always be happening with you, and you should be on that journey together.
Amongst the various places that you have lived, breathed, and visited, whether it be a bookshop in Berlin or the houseboat in Vauxhall where you were selling secondhand books, it seems that stories have always followed your journey a little bit. At this juncture, do you find that books find you, or do you find them?
Oh, what is in books that I like to read?
Books that appear in front of you that you like to read, because sometimes they can be quite timely. Some of the books that you,
yeah, I mean,
that you're in.
There's so much going on, and it's such a big industry, and I know so many people, and I know so many writers. So on one hand, I want to read everything that's being published by people I really like. On the other hand, I'm sort of also itching to go backwards as well, and especially read more books in translation, more kind of historical texts that aren't necessarily like historical novels, but books that were written in the 30s, books that were in the 50s. That's the thing that I have sort of the least time to do, and that kind of writing, language, culture has changed so much, and I think it's really important to kind of being able to mark that in terms of literature. So I wish I had more time to really just sit down with a book for no reason, but that's the one thing that I miss. But as I'm listening to more books, then I am reading a lot more than I had done more recently. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. And now I'm just thinking of all the books I would like to go back
Does
and
it
read.
change your relationship with books, doing it now for your job than for pleasure? Do you have a different lens on things? It's kind of like, so for example, I never want to know about the filmmaking industry. I don't want to know how they do the CGIs. I don't want to know it because I love films and movies so much that I think for me it would ruin some of the magic, the magic trick of it. Knowing all the component parts and essentially delivering a book to its birth as you do, right? Does it ruin the magic? Does it amplify it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, I really, I just want to curl up and read. Given the way that the world is right now and the fact that I've got 3 children, etc., like, would I be like I'm 42, would I really be reading so much? But I do get to read a lot because it's my job. And I'm so excited about some of the books that I have coming out. And the fact that I get to just sort of talk about them all day and get paid for it, it kind of, that makes me like, publishing books is really magic, and especially at my level as a publisher, when you're on your way up, I suppose, as an editorial assistant and you're learning everything, like that's really hard, and that's a lot of the operational side of it. But my side is like, there's this like sexy side as well, it's like, it's interesting, it's working with words, it's working with authors, it's thinking about their thoughts and trying to help them get the best out of those thoughts. And that's why that's why I think about equity and stuff like that a lot. It's like, how do you get the best out of someone and help them to make their book the best it can be, that will appeal to the most amount of people. And we have no idea what works, really. We have this sort of adage in publishing. It's like, if everyone knew how to make a bestseller, then we would just be making them every day, right? And we can't, and we don't, but we have to try. And that magic of, like, especially working with the marketing and the publicity teams, it's really incredible. And so no, I don't feel like the kind of behind the curtain is has waned my interest. I feel incredibly lucky to work in my hobby, and then I'm always feel a bit guilty that I don't have any other hobbies.
I mean, you don't have the time for anymore. I'm sorry. Can I do that?
It's
I love
true.
it.
Thanks. You let me off on that one.
Just read all the books. Absolutely. What is your favorite book of all time? Can I ask you that? Is that
Yeah, you can definitely answer that. It's called This Blinding Absence of Light by Tahar Ben-Jaloum. And it's a very slim novel about, almost sort of a novella, about 5 men who are in a Moroccan underground prison. And it's just so interesting because you kind of get to understand the intensity of humanity, and each prisoner has like a different skill. So one always knows what time it is. One is really big on like politics, like one is really great at exercising and kind of keeping that mental health up. They really have this and then the other one is a great storyteller. And so between them, they sort of have these different skills that help them to survive in this really oppressive environment. And you sort of see this sort of level of humanity that I think is really extraordinary. Beautiful. That's my favorite.
What are on right after this conversation? What is next for Dialogue Books? Or for
oh
you?
My God. Well, I mean, we're about to launch as a division. We've been a division for 6 months. So we're about to kind of launch. We've got a new logo, new website, new everything. We're hiring more people. And I think, we had such an amazing reception to the news that we were becoming a division. And I think what people across the industry and writers can really see is that it's not about me having a new job. It's about the opportunities that actively created from creating something new, opportunity for the writers and its opportunities for the readers, and that's really exciting. So building this division. We've got amazing books coming next year. We've got great books coming for 2025. We've got brilliant books coming for the end of this year. So yeah, publishing more, and making sure that purpose is, and our mission is kind of.
I love it. Well, your mission and your purpose absolutely shines through. Sharmaine, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.